Okay. You ready to paint with me today? I think that's all working. Okay, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. In fact, today is episode number 4 or 5, fifth episode we've done focusing on the work of Picasso. Today's the end of Pablo Picasso week, and it also happens to coincide with the 140th birthday anniversary of Picasso's birthday. So we're going to recreate a painting of his that is quite famous. This is in the collection of the Tate Museum in it's, I think, technically in the Tate collection in Liverpool, although I've seen it at the Tate Modern in London, England. That's where I've seen it, but I'm not sure where it technically is. So, but it is in the collection of the Tate galleries, and if you're not familiar, the Tate is really the most major art, well, besides maybe the National Gallery in London, the main museum organization, art gallery system in the United Kingdom. So let's make this painting. Actually, just as a quick question, do you hear a weird crunchy sound to the audio in the music? I'm just curious. I was hearing that I guess as I was going live. So let me know in the chat. I was like, is that just, there's something weird going on? Maybe people who are listening can't hear it, and maybe it's just, maybe this is all just in my head. Okay, so we are going to recreate this painting. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the painting itself and the circumstances surrounding it. As I said, this is episode 5 of 5 episodes focused entirely on Pablo Picasso, so we're not going to cover his early biography because we've done that previously. We're not really going to talk about the origins of Cubism. We did that in the most recent episode where we painted the 3 musicians. That turned out really great. So today's episode is really more talking about Picasso's like the what do you call that? The interwar years between the 1920s and 30s, 40s, and then maybe a little bit towards Picasso's late part of his life. So let's get right into this. So here is the image that we are going to transfer onto a canvas. Now, I've already done this, but I'm going to show you a quick time lapse showing you how to do it. So you could download this free template that I put up on the on the Dropbox. The Moodle is I just came from teaching all day long at Emily Carr University here in Vancouver. My brain was a little fried, so I'm going to spend another 3 hours doing some teaching online here. So anyway, you'll see a link to a Dropbox folder. In this Dropbox folder, there is a whole bunch of images or files with artist names, and in each one of these there's files, images, and outlines which you can use. You can print out and do with them as you wish. You can see we did a whole week dedicated to the work of Vincent van Gogh. We did another Picasso painting a few months ago focusing on his Dove of Peace for International Peace Day. We also talked about some artists from India and whose work is often described as sort of like India's Picasso, and a few of them, particularly M.F. Hussain, was often described as like the Muslim Picasso, for instance. So anyway, if you're interested in checking those out, those would be really great. And then here we have artworks that are coming down the pipeline shortly here. So we have a really special, we're doing a Van Gogh again for Halloween. We're going to do Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse on Thursday, and it kind of is a little bit of a potential antidote to Picasso. We're looking at one of the greatest artists of, well, I think one of the greatest, certainly great feminist artists of all time, Niki de Saint-Phal, on Tuesday. Is that tomorrow already? So that if you've had enough of Picasso and you want the exact opposite of Picasso, we're going to look. She's an incredible artist, a super inspiration to me as well. But we'll talk all about her very, very different take on art than Picasso's. So anyway, let's get right into it. There's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself watching. I encourage you to join it and upload your version of today's painting to the Facebook group here. And I think next Saturday I'm going to pull all those images off. We're going to gather around, put the paintbrushes down, and just celebrate the achievements of the 136 people that are part of this group as of today, and all of the incredible work that you guys have been making, some of which in direct response to what I've been doing in class, and then certainly other things you've been doing outside of class that you're passionate about, because ultimately the goal is to be making your own artwork, right? So, oh, Laurie says, yeah, I heard that crunchy sound in the music. Do you still hear it in the background, or is it because the music is much lower, it's not noticeable? If it's really bad, I'll just turn the music completely right off. So, because I can't hear it, otherwise it would be a nightmare from an audio perspective. Anyway, okay, so Picasso, born 1881, dies in 1973 at the age of 91. So today's painting he created the day after his 56th birthday. So at this point in his life, he's now kind of crossed that midway point, and he still has a lot of runway to go. I mean, he still lives for another, I'm not good at math, but what's that, 35, 40 years or so on top of where he is today. But generally, people would say that he was, maybe a bit on the decline, I suppose. In terms of, like, when he was young, he was just constantly generating new things. Some people look at Picasso's old work as kind of recycling a lot of the same themes that he'd already explored when he was younger. Now, I will say, I was up late last night watching the replay of the auction that MGM had in Las Vegas, and there was an auction of artwork that they were selling from the Picasso restaurant at the Bellagio Hotel, and it was really fascinating. Most of the work that was on display and that was subsequently auctioned off, they raised, I think, like $110 million on 9 artworks. Most of it was some of his later work. Most of his later work, towards the end of his life, was because he was now, by the point he makes today's painting, he's pretty much acknowledged as the most famous artist alive. He is, an international celebrity, to the point, he can't walk down the street without getting mobbed by people who want autographs and photographs, just like a major celebrity today, right? But, we don't really hear of painters or sculptors being treated the same way that a major musician or actor would, or filmmaker would be. But that was certainly, Picasso was more famous than any actor at this particular time. And during this time in the mid-30s, you may have heard that there was a little bit of instability in Europe. So let's keep on scrolling down. This is all stuff that we've already kind of covered. Well, some of it, we haven't gone deeply into everything here, but we will in the new year. We'll be looking at a whole bunch of his Cubist and neoclassical work. So let's jump into this here. So here's finally where we are. Okay, so at this point, there's instability in Europe. There's the rise of fascism in Spain, in Italy, and of course in Germany. And a lot of this comes out of the Great Depression. The world's financial markets are in a downward spiral, and you have these strong men who I'm going to solve everything, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to become real strong. And Picasso, being Spanish, even though he lived most of his life in France, it takes it a little bit personally, which I think, is a very Latin Spanish kind of you know, there's like the sense of pride in country is arguably stronger than it is in many other countries. And when I say Latin, I mean like Latin America, like South America, Mexico, like a really intense feeling of pride. And when Picasso sees fascism rising in Spain, it is, he takes it kind of personally. He's quite upset about it. Picasso, like a lot of intellectuals and artists at this time, was sort of flirting with communism, which couldn't be more different than fascism. Although people will argue, we can get into that whole argument, but essentially they're on the opposite ends of the political spectrum. So you have Picasso is concerned with the progress of his home country. And in, I think it's April 1937, Franco, who becomes dictator of Spain, asks Hitler for assistance in what is now the full-fledged civil war in Spain. And Franco asks Hitler to send some airplanes to help quell the civil war. And the Nazis bomb, an aerial bombing of a small town in northern Spain called Guernica. And it is this is a town that is not a military center. It's not like there's tanks and airplanes being built there. It is mostly a civilian target, and it's a kind of a show of force. It's like a flexing of muscles, like, hey, you guys, you know, if you don't cooperate with this new fascist government, look what's going to happen. So the fascists in Spain and Germany make an example out of Guernica. Now we're going to make a painting based on Guernica in the new year, in celebration or honor or mourning of the anniversary of Picasso making the painting. But it kind of just the reason I'm talking about this is today's painting is directly related to all of this. So Picasso, literally days after this horrific atrocity happens in Guernica, where the civilian city is obliterated by thousands and thousands of bombs. Really, it's, some people think of it as one of the first signs of World War II, and Picasso's so shocked. He's like, what do I do? Now, I've got all this power. I'm the most famous person on Earth, arguably. How do I respond to this thing? So he decides, I'm going to make a gigantic painting that is going to depict this this situation. So this is the painting that he makes. This is a large painting, and it's a black and white painting, which is kind of a little bit unusual for his paintings at the time. As you could see, a lot of his paintings are very colorful, right? If we look, I mean, some of his Cubist paintings were grays and browns, but very few of them were black and white. You know, they might be monochrome, but black and white and brown and red or something. So there's lots of reasons why people talk about why it was in black and white, partly because Picasso was very inspired by the photographs that were printed in various newspapers at the time of the atrocities, and in particularly the women who, I don't know, photographers took a lot of pictures of these women who were mourning and weeping in the streets because their houses and everything they knew were destroyed, as well as their family members, children, spouses, parents. There was this, so Picasso was struck by those images. And so he does use these little dots that we see in Guernica. This is a little bit of his sort of shorthand for newspaper articles, right? Because he did use collages, but he would then sort of just left them go, and just, this is like little text. So you know, other people might say it's because this idea of black and white, that there's good and bad, and it's like there's no gray area here. It's all like very harsh. Now, I just want to share this really quickly. This is the different stages of this painting. These photographs were taken by the model who posed for today's painting, Dora Maar, who was Picasso's mistress and model throughout this period of his life. For about 15 years, she was his mistress. And so she took these photos of Picasso painting the painting, and Picasso altered this painting quite radically over and over as he was painting it. So let's get to the image itself. Let's transfer it on, and then we'll continue our discussion as we make the painting. So is there anything else I want to mention? Maybe just as we can talk about this kind of throughout the episode. I don't know if anyone had a chance to watch the Hannah Gadsby documentary, or not documentary, it's a comedy special, or purports to be a comedy special, that she released probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Again, it's called Nanette. Hannah Gadsby is an Australian comedian, and in that's Netflix, I think it's Netflix special, she takes Picasso to task. And I think it's just a little bit, especially maybe more so than any other painting, especially when we talk about his relationship with Dora Maar, it might be something to put in the back of your mind. So I'm just curious if anyone's had a chance to watch this this great comedy special. So okay, let's get into the painting. And okay, so I'm gonna play this video just showing how the transfer process works, and then I'll talk over top of it as we go here. So again, you can print out this document from the Dropbox on regular photocopy paper, or maybe a little bit thicker. I tend to use a little bit heavier cardstock, which just makes my life miserable, because you just have to press harder with the pencils or pen to get the image to appear on the canvas. You'll see I'm using some carbon paper, and you can see that carbon paper has been used many times, probably upwards of 20 times I've used it. And I just slide it under there, and then I'm gonna just trace over this image. And I didn't use a ruler, although you certainly could, because Picasso's like not really concerned with that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's a single perfectly straight line in any of his works, and especially if you've ever seen these up close. I'm just going to show you how I just rotate this around, because the carbon paper is maybe a little bit smaller than the actual image. And then I use that also just to kind of draw off the carbon paper so I can get down on there, right? So let's just keep the train running, right? And then eventually you got it all on there. You can just peel off the tape, and ta-da, you've got your canvas ready to go, right? And you can keep this. It's kind of neat that it does the reversed version of it if you have two-sided carbon paper anyway. And you can save this. If you don't like the way today's painting turns out, then you can certainly do a second version of it, a third, fourth, fifth, as many as you like. I'm just going to show these are the results. This is, when did we make that? I think on Thursday we made that. On Tuesday we made this girl with a dove. And then last Monday we made the old guitarist. And those are all on the Dropbox if you want to do any of those previous paintings. Okay, lots of blah 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 to get going here, so let's get into the painting. So I'm going to put some paint all over my palette. It's funny, every time I do these episodes and the time is just a little bit different than normal, it kind of gets me a little bit confused. And even though I was like, I'm totally ready, I'm ready earlier than normal, and then, no, you're not at all ready, Michael. So let's take some, I'm just taking this warm yellow. This is right out of the tube. Now, you're like, well, that's not, doesn't look like a tube. It's because I've squeezed all the extra little bits out of several tubes and just condensed them into these jars. So rather than throwing out tubes of paint that still have paint in them, because I can't squeeze any more out, I like cut them open. And I'm probably going to do that with a few tubes today, because usually all the tubes of paint start to run out around the same time. Now, I've got plenty of extra tubes up here if I need them. But I tend to... What on earth did I do with all my paintbrushes here? One second. Okay. I've somehow misplaced a whole bunch of paintbrushes. Oh, here they are. Ah, okay. This is... I'll get to this here maybe while this is all drying. So, let's mix up this water in the acrylic paint. This is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylics. It's generally discouraged to use water when you're painting with acrylics, if you can help it. But I do use it as a foundational kind of process, just to kind of quickly get paint on here. And because water tends to make the acrylic dry a little bit faster, because it just thins it out, I like using it for this particular step. And like I say, if you've watched me do paintings for a while, you know, you've heard me say all this about 100 times now. But the reason why I'm using this warm yellow is because artists for hundreds of years have used this foundational colored ground. It really kind of started in Italy during the Renaissance period. And they called it the Imprematura, the first layer. And traditionally, artists would use maybe like a brown, like a warm brown, rusty red color. And also diluted, because usually they would be painting with oil paint, right? And diluted with some like linseed oil or turpentine, to get just a very, very thin coat, just like we did with water, because we're painting with acrylics. And the goal is to actually help speed up the painting process, because maybe this color appears in the painting. I like it for lots of reasons. One of it is just obliterates the white. And I always prefer to have just some color there rather than white. I also like that it gives it a little bit of that warm Kodachrome glow. This is definitely something pretty unique to the way I like painting, but I just really like the effect that it makes. And it's barely noticeable if you use brown instead, which is, again, the traditional way. The Impressionists did this less frequently. There are, yeah, well, I won't get into the complexities of all this. So let's get right into the painting. I think this needs to dry for a few minutes, so let's put this to the side. Let's start getting some paint on the palette. My paint box is getting lighter and lighter and lighter, because some of these tubes of paint are pretty much empty. So we'll see how much we can get on the palette. I always say put about as much paint on the palette as toothpaste on your toothbrush, because you don't want to have a whole bunch of paint that's sitting there slowly drying for hours and hours until you finally get around to actually using it. Okay, so this looks like I might have to cut this blue open here. I'm using my medieval torture device to squeeze all of the paint down to the bottom down here. Oop. And maybe that's okay for right now, and we'll cut that open a little bit later. So here's a tube of my warm yellow, the exact same warm yellow I used on the background, right? Literally the exact same. This is just out of the tube as opposed to out of the tube and into a jar. I think this cool red is also about to be cut open. I do have a tube of black paint. Maybe we might actually use black paint in today's episode. As you know, I rarely use black paint because we can make a paint that is like 99% black with just the colors we have on these tubes. Let's use some of this cool blue. If you're new to the show and you're wondering the actual names of these tubes because you want to get the same ones, which I recommend you do, because you'll get different results if you use different paint, which might sound obvious, but I think there's some people think, oh, the color looks pretty similar. I'll just get that, or it's a little bit cheaper. Although I would say actually these might be some of the cheapest paints at your art supply store, mostly because they're really the most common ones. You don't need to buy all of the tubes of paint at your art supply store. I have done that when I made money many years ago on my paintings. One of the first things I did was like, oh, I'm going to buy every tube of paint that I can. I'm going to have the best palette. And then I started making paintings with all these random colors, and my paintings just started going plummeted in terms of quality, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and it was like, oh, it's because like I'm using every spice in the spice cabinet to make my soup, and it's like a mess, right? There's, just like a chef would say, sometimes you gotta, like, having some restraint is better, right? And because then you can actually showcase these colors, and we can make virtually any color that a human eye has ever seen with just these 6 colors. Okay, so this is still a little bit wet, so while that's just drying, I'm just going to share here. You may have seen over the past few episodes, these are cheap brushes. Remember, I bought these brushes a year ago, over a year ago, from I think Michael's Art Supplies, for like these sets of, I have about 12 of them. I bought 2 different sets of paintbrushes from them, and they've held up pretty good for cheap brushes. These, like 2 sets, each set was like 12, 13 bucks. Yeah, they're not the best brushes on earth. And if you go back to a video I made last, I don't know, again, like 150 episodes ago, I bought these brushes, and so you can watch that. I think it's called Art Supply Buyer's Guide. Anyway, over the past year, some of these, they call this metal part on a paintbrush the ferrule, and it holds the bristles in place and then holds it to usually a metal or like aluminum shaft here. And some of these have been popping on and off. So finally, I have some Gorilla Glue, which is like a really nice, good, strong glue. And just the other day, after I finished the last painting, the Cubist painting, put a little bit on there and also a little bit of tape just to make sure they were secure. And now this is where I was like, where are all my paintbrushes? So here they are, and I saved them. That makes me happy. Also, this is again a super little random thing, but I had a paintbrush that had. That was, I think, the same brand, and after a year of using it all the time, the paint started to chip off, and it was getting in the paintings as I'm painting them, as my fingers are rubbing around. So I just took some sandpaper and just sanded it all off, which actually feels really nice. Now I've got this kind of like bare wood brush. Anyway, probably something no one is concerned about but me, but I just wanted to show you that you can keep these tools. You don't have to throw them out the minute there's a little tiny problem with them. Okay, I think this needs a quick blow dry. So it's still a little bit wet, so I'm just going to mute the microphone for Okay. One thing I just noticed is this is a new set of canvases that I ordered from Amazon, canvas boards, and just having put that yellow on there, the painting canvas is warped a little bit. So which is, you know, I have not put this brand in the description below because I wanted to check out and see how they behaved. And I know it's a tiny thing, but it annoys me. So this is definitely something I won't be recommending to people, even though I think I've got another 40 of them that I ordered all at one time because it was a good deal, and you know, you get what you pay for, right? So there's 3 different brands I put in the description below. If you want to get some, use either of those, because we've used them over the past year and a half and they work great. And they're just an extra $1 more than the dollar brand version you get from your dollar store, or apparently this one as well. Okay, so finally, after enough talking, let's get into the painting and just think about how we want to approach this. I think one of the things I really like about Picasso's late period paintings is more, like, and especially as he gets older and older and older, they just become much, much looser. So that is some reason why some people don't like these works. I find them to have a lot of freedom, right? His earlier paintings compositionally and technically are very experimental, but they're also very precise. As he's getting older, I think he just could care less about that kind of precision and he's just more free. You know, he can do anything he wants and people will buy it, so he does do anything he wants, right? And so here, I think it really doesn't matter where we start, although I probably will go into the background and get this kind of gold color first, which is not too different than our background. So let's do that. Okay, so this color is basically a warm brown. So we're basically taking the warm yellow. We're going to add a little bit of red, warm red, and warm blue to it. Mix it right here. And let's see. I'm going to go down to, I usually start with a little bit larger brush, but you know, this is about the size of a fingernail on my, right? So I'm going to take this. You know, even this area right here, I think I could just take my warm yellow from here and just paint this right on this corner here, just to get this started. You know, yes, it's the same paint that I painted in the background, but that previous layer had some water in it and diluted. You probably can't notice a difference on camera right now. I do notice there's a bit of, on the other side, a little bit of white in there. So let's just take a tiny bit of white. And I think it's this area. Maybe that's even a little bit too much white. So okay. And heck, while we're here, we got some of that white on here. Why don't we just take this and I'm going to paint that. A little bit of white in and around a few places. This outline. So if you probably, maybe I'll even just make this a little bit darker. So you can come in and you see a little bit of that. Okay, so now let's just move on, because you can barely see that. It'll be more apparent if I had done that later on. So let's take some warm yellow, a little bit of warm red. That was even a little bit much, perhaps. And we got an orange. And now let's take some warm blue, and again, just a little bit of it. And we mix this together, we're going to get this kind of orangey color. I think let's put a bit more warm yellow back in, just a bit more. So now what we've got is this very yellow brown, warm yellow brown, right? And let's take, maybe let's just squeeze a little bit of that off. And you can put all of this in the background. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to put this all back here, and then we can paint other things. I'm always looking, what is the fastest way that we can get this train running here? You know what? Let's just paint this whole thing like that. Because I'm always just like, I just want to get as much paint on this canvas as quickly as humanly possible, and then we can modify things ad nauseum afterwards. In fact, let's just paint that down here. Because certainly, we've talked about this over the past week, one of the things that Picasso is famous for is just layering of color. And I bet you that he would do something like this. I mean, there are some films where you can see Picasso painting, and he is just very clearly just throwing paint almost randomly onto a canvas at times. Like, he's clearly moving so fast that it's hard to believe that he's capable of really making like super informed decisions. And I don't mean that he's, you know, a fool or wasn't aware of what he was doing, but I think he was just doing what I'm doing, which is just trying to get the canvas covered as quickly as possible, and then we can modify things afterwards. So that's a good beginning. Again, I might make that a little bit darker. I might make these a little bit darker, but let's just let that dry and just move on. Okay, so where else should we go? How about, now there's a lot, again, this, you can see in here, there's all sorts of stuff going on there. I'm not even sure everything of what's happening in here. But now that I've got this brown on here, is there any more brown that I need to use at this immediate moment? I don't know if there is. I don't think so. So, you know, whenever I'm working on a painting, I'm always just, before I wipe my brush clean, I always just think like, okay, where else can I use this, or can I use the current mix I have on here and just modify it with just another little dab of another color, and then move on. That way I'm not just unnecessarily cleaning my brush every 20 minutes kind of thing. Right? I actually clean my brushes quite infrequently. Lolly says, I forgot you were live tonight. I just came from one of your color mixing vids, and I've been working on some of the other Picasso we've done, but I'm going to bed, and I'm going to watch this in bed. It's silly o'clock at night here. I'm glad I can be a part of your nighttime routine, Lolly. And I'll take that as flattering that I help put you to sleep. Okay. So let's get back to the painting here. I think what's the best I think, you know what I want to do? I want to put some color underneath some of these areas, which I'll later paint black. So maybe I can use this color after all. We've got this, I want to try to mix this color that's under here. And so I think that's, maybe I'll take a, because it looks a bit like of a peachy, almost like a flesh tone. So let's take some, basically mixing the same color we had prior, a little bit more reddish. and a lot more white. The one thing is I just want to be careful about getting too much white in there, otherwise it might make this hard to see, the pencil lines that I traced over there originally. So I'm going to spread that out just kind of thin here. I think there might be a different color over here, but let's just get this in place anyway. In fact, let's just go all the way here like this. Right, and then to thin it out, I can just take my brush and kind of scrub a bit out to get back to, so I can see my pencil lines if I've made it too dark. Okay. It's working. I'm just going to wipe that paint off my brush. And you know, now I see that maybe there is a few browns that I can use, these areas here. So let's just go back to this brown. Let's add some more blue to it. Now it goes green, right? Let's add some more red to it. Let me get this much darker brown. Right? I'm not even going to bother adding more yellow to it because I think this is good. I know there's a yellow line in there, but I think I'll just paint that with some yellow later, maybe a little bit of white in there. And same thing, I know there's a couple of different browns here, but I'll modify those on their own later on. That's good. Okay. So let's take some red now, right out of the tube. I'm a little bit worried it's not going to be as dark as, or it'll go a little bit too dark with that yellow, so I'm adding a bit of white into this red, which is going to make it a tiny bit pinkish. But I can always paint more red. Oh, I will paint more red over top of that later. Okay. And some reds in here. Okay, we got some red down here. As I said, remember there's that yellow in there, but look, because there's probably going to be some white in that yellow, I'm like, yeah, I'll just do that later. Let's take, while I'm here, I'm just going to see, maybe I'll take a smaller brush. I try not to do too much of this earlier on in the painting process, but let's just see. This is pretty much just red right out of the tube. Oh, there's one little bit more red. Where's this line? Right here somewhere. Okay. Moving along, trucking away. Really, this painting, we're going to kind of move quickly until we get to the last little bit, which is really the dark outlines, which again we can do with black. It might look, this might be one of the few paintings where the black might actually be kind of effective. Usually I recommend trying to mix your dark colors on with your paint. Therefore it just sort of seems to integrate and is not quite as strong. But there's something about this painting that having a bit of that, of a really intense black outline, I think also works conceptually with the work, the intensity of that dark color. Well, he says there's a darker brown along the middle. Is that something I just painted? I just see in your comment. Paula says, I've ordered some acrylic paper. I will pick them up soon. I have been using watercolor paper, and they work fine, though. I mean, I don't really, honestly, I wouldn't even know what the difference between acrylic, like paper that's made for acrylic paint and watercolor paint is. I really think they would probably be very similar. The only difference I could say is that maybe watercolor paper is intended to be absorb a little bit more, versus maybe acrylic might be treated slightly different so that the paint, rather than absorbing into the paper, stays a little bit more on the surface, but I can't really think they would make too much of a difference. Hello says, haha, you don't send me to sleep. Unfortunately, I sleep with one eye open watching what you're doing with your paintings. Okay. Let's see. Since I just came home from work, I'm wearing a nice pair of jeans, which is a really bad idea because I'm probably going to get some paint on these nice pair of jeans, but in the interest of keeping this show PG, I'm going to keep my pants on. I'm just trying to be a little bit careful that I don't somehow get paint all over my lap. But it's because I like using painting clothes. I like just to wipe my hands all over my clothes, and the acrylic paint dries quickly. I just have to remember not to just be lazy and wipe my hands on my pants. Okay, how about let's go into the warm blue here. So let's take warm blue, and actually maybe let's go to this view. So I'm going to take my warm blue, and I'm also going to, again, just like I did with the red, take a bit of white and mix this in. That way, if I have to do two layers, and I probably will, this first layer already has some blue in it, and it will cover up some of the yellow a little bit, and just, I think, make that blue, the warm blue, really shine. So I'm just looking around. Where is all my warm blue areas? I think there's some in the hair here, so I'm just going to put some big marks. And it just feels so nice to make lines like this. Just go whew, big sweeping lines. Oh, I just love it. Now, there is a bunch of little lines all over on the face here. Let me get to that in a moment. Oh, and I see right off on the side here. Okay. Now, my question to myself is, how can I avoid getting mired into the details in here So I think what I'm going to do is continue with what I just did, is take some warm blue and a little bit of white with a smaller brush. And just do a really rough outline here. And then I'm going to, I think, finish most of this off with some white. So now the question is, did Picasso do exactly what I'm doing right now? No, I don't think so. But I don't think he... Because we have the benefit of seeing his painting after it's been finished, right? Again, I think Picasso would have done something maybe a little bit like this. And he might have used... There might be all sorts of different colors underneath that white. This mouth, I'm just going to paint that all blue. All of this. I know this might raise the fear of people like, oh my goodness, we're just losing all these details. Well, you know what? Let's have some fun and use your imagination, or develop some skills on how to replicate that particular area. So we'll come back to that, and I'll just show you how I will approach all this. But just like Picasso, like this is the freedom that Picasso paints with at this particular time, moving quickly through different areas, not overthinking things, using a big brush. This painting is... How big is it? It is, let's even take a quick little look. So the painting is 61 centimeters by 50 centimeters, which is 23 inches by 19 inches. Which means, you know, this canvas is 9 by 12. So essentially, it's basically two canvases. It's basically like, what is it, that twice the size? You know, you could basically fit 4 of these canvases next to it to create the original image. So it's not that much bigger than what we have here, although it is bigger. And that does mean something when we're trying to get some smaller details, and it can cause people some problems. So you just do as much as you can. You can see I'm also putting a bit of this blue where there's going to be purple. That's okay. Like these areas are purple. Oh, and there's a little bit up here too. Okay. That is good. So, let me just go a little bit further in here. Now I'm just going to will just wash my brush really quickly, because now I'm going to transition from the warm blue to the cold blue. You know, we've talked in previous episodes about, you know, the importance of warm and cool colors for creating depth and space in a painting. Picasso is one of those artists that really plays with warm and cool colors in unconventional ways, and he's been doing that throughout his career, basically since the blue period, right? We talked about that on the very first painting, the old guitarist that we did as part of this series, where he literally inverted the warm and cool color structure that we've used and that most artists have used, right? Again, it's just that Picasso bravura of just I'm not going to do what other people do. I'm going to do something completely different. And, you know, it certainly made a name for himself in the process, right? Okay. So, let's now mix a cool green. So we see all this beautiful cool green in here, right? So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to take some cool yellow. And let's just start with a little bit of cool blue. And as well, he's got a bit of white in here. So let's start with a little bit of white and see how that looks. Maybe just a bit more cool blue, maybe a bit more white. And there, I think we're in the zone here. So we're gonna get a little bit more teal in a few places, but I think for this part, at least initially, and when we're using these sort of a little bit more pastel-like colors, it makes it really easy to paint other colors over top of them. So, I think there's going to be a different green here, but I'm just going to put that there. Got a bit of red on there. It still was a little wet. That's okay. Okay. So now I'm just going to take some more cool blue and put this in here and get a little bit more white. Now we get a little, maybe even a little bit more. To get a bit more of a teal quality. And I think I could have added a little bit more white now that I see that, so let's do that. Let's put a bit more white. I'm going to use some yellow with white as we go to kind of, so don't worry about obliterating some of these details. Okay. I think that might be good enough. Maybe do I want to turn this a little bit more teal? I think that's okay. I might just take a bit of this and put this a little bit in here. See here, this earring. Okay, I think that's good for that layer. And I know some people might be kind of freaking out because it might be getting a little complicated and where some of these lines go. I think it's okay to feel a little bit like that it's a little bit complicated, right? That's okay. I'm actually just going to take, I've noticed a little bit of an area that I'm going to add a little more blue to. this green, which again I think is just a little bit more of the yellow green. My cool yellow, and like, don't be afraid to really apply color all over the place. We can delete it, we can move it, we can modify it at any point. But if you've seen any of these, especially later paintings in person in real life, you know that he's deliberately kind of saturating every area of the canvas with lots of color. Right? So if we really want to study an artist like this, then we really have to embrace the way that they're working. Okay, so what? I mean, we're cruising along here. I'm really happy. So what I'm going to do is take a bit of my warm blue again, and I'm just going to paint over some of these light blue areas. In fact, let's just kind of start zooming in now, and you can see the original image is a little bit pixelated. But it doesn't matter because we're making our own version of it, right? So that's a little bit more blue. Let's take a tiny bit more of white and put it in here. I think it's a little bit darker because I didn't clean my brush. And so I'm going to wipe this off. And after me talking about not needing to clean my brush, I am going to clean my brush. Because I want this ultramarine blue, my warm blue, to kind of really like shine on its own. So it probably looks the same on camera, but in person, that ultramarine blue has a luminescence that I really like. So it helps just to take that extra little second. Oops. Okay. And then now I'm going to take some of this warm blue and put this into the hair area. Maybe not going over everything. I kind of like how some of it is staying there. So I might just keep that warm blue there. So just as this area is right there. So you can see the difference. Here's my warm blue over top of the yellow. Here's my warm blue over top of that warm blue that had white in it. Totally different color, right? This is why I added white to it and did that initial pass. It's not because I'm nuts. Well, maybe I might be nuts, but so I don't really have anything to say to that. I'll leave it to people to answer that question. Okay, now I'm going to go over a lot of this kind of baby blue here with my warm blue. And I might kind of go back, and because ultimately I'm going to, now after this, I'll put a whole bunch of white all over the place. And it might mean that I have to kind of go back and do some white, and then maybe take this warm blue and put it back, and it's okay. This is the teeth, where the teeth will go in a few minutes. Okay. What else have I got? All the lines I want. If I come, actually, let's just gonna take a bit of this warm blue. Okay. It looks like a bit of a mess right now. That's okay. Okay, so let's zoom this back out. And just so we can see where we're at. Okay. Now, I think are we ready to start with some white here? So what I'm doing, I'm just taking a quick little look at both of them and just seeing if I feel like, I guess I could have put another brown, but that's okay. If that could always do that later. Scanning across. Yeah, I think I'm just going to clean this brush off. And now I'm probably going to start going into some smaller brushes. So using maybe this little bit larger brush, right? That's about the size of you know, I can fit 2 or 3 of them on a fingernail. And then a small brush for doing some fine detailing. And I'm going to start putting in the white. So, where should we start here? Now it's okay if I have a little bit of color on my white. In fact, I'd maybe prefer it a little bit, because I can always go and put, you know, so-called perfect clean white from the tube on my painting later on. But it might be kind of nice just to be able to see that difference. Again, that's a very Picasso thing, is showing your work. We talked about this a few classes ago, I think when we were talking about the Rose period painting, the Harlequin with the, or the acrobat with the young Harlequin, how in my opinion, he shows his work deliberately to convey the idea of labor, and that he's worked on the painting because we can see lots of colors poking through in different areas, and I think he does that deliberately. So now let's zoom in. We're going to go right to the face and start putting white paint on here. So I might end up just using my small brush now that I look at it. Because really, I think we're at that stage where we're really now starting to bring some resolution to it. You know, this white is going to, as it dries, go a little bit clear, or not clear, but it's a little bit transparent, which can be a bit frustrating. But again, that might be frustrating for some other artists' particular kinds of processes, but when it comes to Picasso, it might actually be exactly what we want, is being able to see some of the other colors underneath this color. Okay. Like, I like the idea of potentially touching the painting up with black or going and using a different blue. I mean, there's so many different ways we can approach this painting, so. So you can see I'm kind of going quickly, just laying in this white. And also accepting the possibility that my painting might differ ultimately from the original. And that could be okay, and it might end up being not only just okay, but great. Because I'm painting this white here, if I paint my warm blue back over top of it, it'll actually look really great. It'll pop. So I'm not really concerned at all with the way any of this looks so far. I'm really quite pleased. Even some of these areas where, again, you can see some of the blue going underneath. When it comes to Picasso, that's actually great. That's really cool. You might say, why not, like, we could, if I was painting this on my own, one of the things I might have decided to do would be to paint this whole area just white. But it would have obliterated all my pencil lines and people would be lost and freaking out. So I made a decision to put in this kind of baby blue and then the darker warm blue over top of it. So that I could still see some of the structure. So here's where I am right here. You know, this kind of stuff where it's a little bit rough, it might not come across in the original image you see on your left because it is quite pixelated. But that's stuff, like, if you go see, there's a Picasso exhibition that just opened at the Art Gallery of Ontario, the AGO in Toronto. And if you go to that exhibition, you will see that, like, Picasso's paintings, a lot of them up close, are very rough, right? They don't have maybe the polish that you might expect to see on them when you get up close. And you should take that as like an invitation to allow the paintings to be maybe a little bit less clean and perfect and pretty than you might ordinarily otherwise feel that they should be. So I'm just going to paint a bunch of this white, and you're like, oh my goodness, what a big mess. Even if it was a big mess, what would be so wrong with that? Picasso did like 36 paintings like this, of this Weeping Woman series, during a very short period of time between, I think, May 1937, and this painting is done October 26, 1937. So he is just cranking out the material here. And I mean, that's, yeah, so there's certainly lots of room for you to, you know, manipulate some of these lines and do what you want with them. And you know, at this stage of Picasso's career, he's making 5 or 6 major paintings every day. So when you see, if you saw that, and you can watch the replay of that auction, the Sotheby's auction that I think happened on Friday night. If you watch that auction, what was I? You know, he could have made all those paintings in 1 or 2 days. Picasso is, we've talked about this before, used to hold the record for the most amount of artworks created. Somebody beat him by making drawings on the New York subway platform and selling them for, I think, a penny or 25 cents each. I mean, so Picasso's cranking this stuff out. He's not overthinking. He's not, you know, laboring over things. And you could say, well, he was a genius, he was a great artist. You know, that's easy for him and you to say, but for me, I need to, it's like I have a lot, I'm not quite as confident as he is. Well, maybe for one day, paint as if you are really confident. Just put the paint in. Don't question yourself so much. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just throw paint on the canvas, just for one short painting session. Then you can go back to questioning every single thing you do later on, right? You got a whole life to do that. But since we're replicating the work of this artist who was known for his boldness, use it as an opportunity to really kind of play a little bit. Anyway. we look here, like what am I doing with this chin? Okay, let's just zoom back out and see how we're doing here. When I'm so zoomed in, sometimes it's hard to see what's missing. Like I got a white line here. And maybe I'll take just a little bit of a bigger brush. Not sure if that's white or yellow, but you can choose whatever way you want to go with that one. Okay. There we go. So I'm just going to wipe off this paint. Now, I think I'm going to go back on my red now and just use the red right out of the tube. And all these areas that I remember I painted a little bit of red with some white in, I'm just going to quickly go back over them. That's going to give just a much more intense red. And I don't know how it looks on camera, but it does make a big difference. It's all of a sudden like, whoa, now that's a red. Now that's like a red that kind of, it's got some glow to it, some muscle behind it. Versus if I just painted this red directly on the yellow, it would look much darker. And I want a little bit more of a brighter red. Okay. What else? I think we need a little bit of purple on here, don't we? So let's mix a purple. The purple that we're going to use is we're going to make it out of cold blue and warm blue and cold red. So we haven't used the cold red yet. So let's just take some cold red. Maybe we'll move it over to our cold. Why am I putting it by the cold blue? That's not what I wanted. Let's put it right here. Sorry, my apologies. So we want taking the cold red and warm blue and mix this together. And we get, this is a really nice purple, really kind of glowing, bright purple. But it's a little bit dark, right? So let's take some white and just mix this in here. You can see I'm just squeezing the extra little bits of paint that were riding up the bristles. And then Is that it? Maybe a little bit of... Not there. See, like, it looks like he painted a bit of that and then covered it over, so I want to hint at that. Okay, even maybe. I'm just going to put a bit of this, scrub it around in here. Okay. Oh, I guess there was a few little white lines in here that I didn't do either, right? So maybe before I move on, I'm just going to capture that. Oh yeah, the teeth. Let's get these teeth. Oh, I see what he's done. Okay, I was going to do it differently, but I'll do them as 2 rows here. And then he's just drawn lines over top. Interesting. Okay. So, take his cue for that, and so some of this I'm kind of making up here. I'm not really too worried about making it perfect. So I'm just looking at sharpening these areas up a little bit. Okay, I think I'm ready to maybe start putting in some really dark color on here. And yeah, which in terms of time, like for instance, right now, we could if we wanted, we could do this entire outline with just a dark blue, and I think it would look great. We could also use dark black. Lots of different ways that we could do this. It just sort of depends on how much nuance you want to put in here. So, you know, I'm just thinking to myself, looking at it in mind. I think what I want to do now is maybe just a little... Maybe I'll save that yellow. I think, you know what, I think I need to now just go dark. And then we can go back and... Because I think, yeah, I'll paint some of this, those yellow lines maybe afterwards. It might look good after. So, sorry, what I'm trying to do is thinking to myself, should I go with my dark lines next? Or should I continue doing any other colors in here? And I think it might be nice to get these black lines onto the painting, because right now it's maybe looks a little bit loose, right? It might be for some people just kind of a little bit in this nebulous area right now. I think a little bit of those dark lines are just going to instantly pop this painting into a level of finish that it isn't at yet. Although I just see really quick, I know I was like, yeah, okay, that's right, and then oh no, okay, hold on. Let's gonna paint a few of these little white lines up here. And there's white inside, but I think I'm going to keep that like a lighter blue and just do a little bit of a white line on one side. Because I just because I like it. No other reason than that. Because I was just like, I kind of, as soon as I painted that, I thought, you know, I think I might just going to keep it. So I'm going to keep it. It's my painting. I get to do whatever I want with it. Okay, so I guess the question is, do I use, I'm going to do, you know what, okay, what I'll do is use my dark color on the palette, and then I might do a little touch-ups with actual black at the very end, if I need to, but maybe I'll be happy with it as it is. So, let's even get a bit more warm red. Whoa, that's a lot. Maybe I can even suck some of it back up. So the way I kind of suck paint back into the tube is kind of squeeze the air out, put it onto the paint, let go, and then sort of try to get it to pull the paint back into the tube. Okay, so let's take here, we've got our warm red. We got cool blue. Let me just make sure all this white will cause that color to go kind of gray, which is not inherently, there's nothing wrong with gray, but if you don't want to mix gray, then you want to make sure there's not white getting in there. So we got our warm red and cool blue. We mix these two colors together. They're virtually opposite from one another on the color wheel, and we get a really kind of dark, muddy color. There's a little bit more red in there, so let's put a bit more blue to even it out. Basically 50-50. And at the moment, it's got a bit of a purple-y kind of quality, which is not surprising because we've warm, you know, a red and a blue together will get purple, but you could see the difference between this purple, which is done using warm red and cool blue, versus this purple, which was cool red and warm. Did I say that right? So this purple is using cool red and warm blue. This purple is cool blue and warm red, right? And one has this really nice, beautiful purple quality. We add white to it. This one, in fact, if we let's just add a bit of white to it. That's the color we get, right? Very different purple. And not that that purple isn't useful or a good purple to use maybe at some point, but if you really want a really nice, like royal purple, then now you know the difference, right? And so that is a little bit purple to make it a little bit more of totally neutral. Let's take a bit of cool yellow we put in there. And now that is just basically the darkest color we can get on our palette, and it's totally just, you know, all the saturation has been removed. Okay. So I'm going to do most of this rest of this work with a smaller brush. And actually, even before I go on, I'm just going to, you know what, actually, I'm going to mix a bit more of this. I was going to clean this brush, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to use a lot of this, so let's just make a bigger batch, because it'll just make my life a little bit easier if I don't have to mix this color again in 5 minutes. So Okay, so right now that's turned into a bit of a brown because it needs a bit more cool blue. So we'll just take a tiny bit more cool blue, add this on here. The other thing, the reason why I also like using a color that a dark color that I've mixed myself as opposed to just taking out the black is I like the possibility of having just more nuance in my dark colors, and that it's not just this dead dark dominating black color on there, but there's just still a bit of extra life in here. Cool. Okay, got a nice big batch of it. Because one of the things I do notice that I do out of habit is when I often make my dark color, I tend to make it a kind of a thin batch of it, and then I'm running out, and then your instinct might be to add water to it to thin it out, to make it go a little bit longer, and then your lines just get more and more transparent, which becomes a bit of a can be frustrating when you're wanting a really nice solid outline and it's getting more transparent. So now I've got a beautiful big mixture of this, which should be able to occupy me for the rest of the painting. Oh, and I was gonna blow dry this too because there's a bunch of wet areas here. So I'm going to mute the microphone for just a minute and blow dry this. Okay, Lolly says, wow, I didn't know that Picasso had painted so many pieces in such a short period of time. I also didn't know he made so many weeping women paintings. That's crazy. And I think today's painting is a great exercise for learning to paint more loosely, more relaxed, etc. And I need more of that in my life. If, you know, we've talked over the episodes, Picasso not being a particularly admirable human being. In fact, his relationship with Dora Maar is nothing short of toxic and abusive. He was horrible to his wives, but in many ways even more horrible to his mistresses, and just treated them, I mean, just like physically abusive beyond just emotionally abusive. Like, terrible person that would, if he was alive today, would be canceled. And that's one of the reasons why, despite a year of people asking me to do Picassos, I've been pretty resistant. But I do think one of the things that we can do while we're painting a painting is just taking a moment to just talk a little bit about, you know, those things, which are not easy things to talk about, and I'm sure some people will tune out because of that. But rather than ignoring it, it is, you know, can be what we call as teachers a teachable moment, right? And you know, some people, and I think I put it in the Facebook page talking about today's episode, is, you know, Dora Maar was not happy with Picasso painting, using her as sort of the symbol of victimhood, and painting 36 paintings of her in tears, and as the symbol of this, of, like, you know, fascist oppression, right? She saw herself as a strong woman, as an artist first and foremost, and then as someone who did some posing and modeling for Picasso, obviously, and other artists. And I think she quite resented the fact that she was now made as the poster child for this mourning woman, right? It was not how she saw herself, which is, can be the danger of posing for a photo or, whatever for an artist. You're not really necessarily sure how they're going to use your likeness. But also people were saying, that people have written that this is not a portrait of a woman weeping because of Franco and the bombing of Guernica, but of a woman weeping because of the abuse that Picasso had put her through. Right? It's it's the eternal question is how do we appreciate art by people who aren't good people, right? Picasso, undeniably, that's what's so frustrating with Picasso, is he is undeniably one of the greatest artists of all time. The art he made changed the world, and without Picasso, the art world would be very different today. But he was also a terrible human being and treated the women, particularly in his life, like, I'm a father of a young child, and my goodness, if she grew up and had a relationship with a man like Picasso, I would be horrified. So, it's, you want to separate them and be like, okay, this is a distinct part. Let's look at the art and examine the art. But you can't. But you have to acknowledge that there is this side of him that is very, very ugly. Okay, so let's get back into the painting here. And now that I've got my dark color mixed up, I think I'm going to kind of just work my way from the top down, just so I don't get my hands muddled in the paints too much. And I'll even maybe start in the top left corner here. And we've got, I don't know if you can see it on camera. Let's just move. There, I think that's on screen now. So, you could do this with the Posca acrylic pens. Remember, I've used those a few times throughout these episodes. I do think for today's paint, I used that in the most recent Picasso that we did the other day, the Cubist painting. But I think for this one, I want to play with the brush. I want to have the sense of making this painting and being a little bit messy and so again, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow with some white, and I'm going to maybe do that outline afterwards, which is actually, I think, going to look kind of cool. Because black is often used as the final outline color, but it doesn't have to be. Right? There's plenty of artists that did not do it this way, and Picasso obviously is a prime example. So obviously, if you're left-handed, you might start on the right side of the painting and work your way to the left. That could also work just fine. So here I'm not going to do as many of these, I guess you like these curving lines, which are intended to represent hair. I'm going to simplify this. And you're welcome to do the same, or I think just in terms of the size of my canvas, it's just too much. So whereas there's, you know, obviously, I don't know how many we got, like, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In here, I might have like 4 if I'm lucky. Another material I could use instead of this black is I could use some, I could use my Posca pen, acrylic paint pen, as I've mentioned, but I could also use some fluid acrylics, which for some people might be a great alternative. I'm not gonna use them because I as I said, I kind of want to play with this like this, but I'll get them out here just because you can use acrylic ink to paint on a painting. So maybe I'll just show you. So we have soft body acrylic paints, right? So you can hear it's got a more fluid quality versus if I try to shake this, you're not going to hear any paint sloshing around in those paint tubes, because these big paint tubes are called heavy body acrylics. They're thick paint, right? And they're great for building up thick, goopy paintings. Soft body is just a little bit thinner. Then we have fluid acrylics, which, you know, are more like literally a fluid. And then, of course, we've got acrylic ink, right? And it's like so fluid, it's kind of even frothing up a little bit here. So any one of these would work really well for this particular purpose, for doing some outlining if you wanted, right? And of course, again, make sure I don't put a big blob of paint on an old painting. And then we have our Uni Posca marker, right? So, which already comes great for doing a little outlining, and they make different widths of pen, or of paint, essentially, right? It is an acrylic paint in pen form. But I'm more than happy to use my paintbrush to execute the rest of this painting, even if it means things are going to be a little bit more simplified, just because I could use a very, very tiny brush and I could be here for hours perfecting this, but I'm not. It's not. First of all, it's not. I'm not. I'm not interested in doing that, just out of my temperament. I have done a number of these episodes that were like hours and hours and hours long. Lolly remembers very clearly falling to sleep while I was working on my Diego Rivera painting, and then waking back up in the morning and I was still working away here live, right? I don't want to do that today. And also, I really want to embrace Picasso's, the looseness of which he's painted, right? So I'm not going to be obsessed with making this particular painting perfect. Maybe I'm going a little fast and getting a little bit loose. Some of these are getting kind of blobby. Just have to kind of, sometimes, there is a difference between going fast and being free and being lazy and sloppy, right? I'm kind of a little bit sloppy right now. I think you can see once we start putting this paint in, it really does clean up everything and make things look all of a sudden much more like all the colors really start to pop, which is very satisfying. Okay. Now let's move back in here. And I guess these eyebrows are next. This, I think, is where we're going to go. Okay, now I'm getting into some areas where there might be some of the blue lines as opposed to my dark black lines. So now I'm just kind of making a little distinction in my mind as to where I want to put those lines. I think some of these dark blue lines are on the face, so I'm going to do all my dark lines. come back and do some of that with some blue. Okay, I'm going to outline these earrings. I think that's what these are, right? Or maybe this is an ear. I'm not sure. I think this is definitely an ear thing. So I'm gonna outline it, and then when I get to this area with some white or some yellow, I'll work on that. And then this is a dark line, and we have some warm blue that will connect to it. So let's now go into the rest of this hair. Okay. Maybe I'm actually going to zoom just a bit out so I can see this a little bit more clearly. Paula says, I'm thinking of getting some fluid acrylics. Are they good? I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you, especially you, Paula, because you've been doing a lot of drawings in your sketchbook, which might be a little bit smaller, and you're kind of using your acrylics in some ways like watercolors. I think you'd really like fluid acrylic, and maybe even acrylic inks. I think you might really enjoy using them. It might be very different. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly can't hurt. You know, if you get, you know, just 1 or 2 tubes and just see how they work for you. Like, you might want to think of just getting a black tube of fluid acrylic and try using it for an exercise like this, where we're painting outlines. And then if you decide, you know what, I kind of like the way that they behave, right, just a little bit more fluid, or a lot more fluid. I'm trying to think, I used fluid acrylics for one painting a while ago. It might have been the, who was it? Might have been the Legia Clark. The abstract painting. Did I do that? I think I might have done that with that one. Or did I use the did I use the pen for that? I don't know, it all bleeds into one. But I know I did use it for something at some point in one of these episodes, so. just going to keep on going with all of these strands of hair. You can see now, putting all of those colors underneath, how it gives, does exactly what Picasso was doing here. You get, like, all these little rainbow effects, colors popping in and out. Okay. Before I go too much further, I think here's an earring, right? I assume. Could be part of the ear. Maybe this is an earlobe. And I'm going to paint this in here. That's good. I just wanted, before I get too far, sometimes I just want to make sure that, if you're digging a tunnel and you're hoping it connects with the other side, right? Just making sure that the tunnel is going in the right direction and we're not going to miss each other right in the middle underneath the ocean. Okay, we're rocking around. Let's go. Keep on going. Okay. So at what point am I going to switch over to some dark blue down here? I'm not sure yet. I might mix it shortly and then see. So what is going on down here? I don't know. But that's okay, right? I don't need to know everything. And if anything, it's an invitation for me to use my imagination and put whatever I want into some of these places. That's weird. This area here, I don't know what's going on. I mean, again, it doesn't matter, but it is kind of interesting to ponder. Yeah, I don't think, after all, that I'm going to use any actual black in this painting. I like this dark color. I think it's working for me, at least so far. We'll see as the painting gets much closer to being done, but at this moment, I'm pretty happy. So I'm assuming that these are part of the fabric of the clothes that she was wearing. Yeah. So as for what kind of clothes she was wearing when she posed for this painting, I don't know. And there's some of these areas this is getting kind of goopy and thick with paint, which is, can be fun or not, depending on your temperament. I think it's kind of fun, especially in some of these areas where it otherwise just looks like a big flat color, is allowing it to be a little bit thick. You just have to be careful that you don't rub your sleeve over that area. But as it dries, it'll kind of settle down a little bit. Acrylic paints, at least heavy body paints, are intended to kind of keep their form even after the paint dries, but they will self-level to some small extent. Okay, let's go back up here. Do this other eye. You can see my brush is starting to get kind of goopy and thick, right? So I'm actually just going to clean my brush. Just going to wipe off that excess and just literally clean my brush. Even though I'm going to use the same color, there's just paint is starting to seep up inside the ferrule, and it's starting to it just becomes less of a pleasant painting experience. So it's a good idea just to clean your tools every once in a while. Okay. Start this eye again. there's a blue or black over that blue line. I think what I'll do, I'm going to work my way around the face with this dark color, and then I'm going to come back with the dark blue. Means I'll have to kind of use the blow dryer just to set a few things in place, but that's okay. Turn that on this side. I think this is a teardrop right here. This is, after all, the weeping woman. Okay, so I just got some paint on my finger here, so I'm being sloppy and not paying attention. Paint this triangular shape here. I wonder this. I'm not. I think this is. These are nostrils. I think that's what that is. And it also looks like he's outlining a number of things on like the hands with this dark color. So let's just carry this through. I'm going to skip over the nails on these fingers just for right now. I'm going to do this line here. I'm also going to put kind of raising the line a bit, but that's okay. So it looks like we're gonna, the center of the painting is what is gonna stay a little bit unfinished for the right now, and we'll come in and tackle that kind of right, I guess, the end. So let's maybe do the rest of the sleeve down here. I'm really enjoying painting this painting. It's really fun just to. This feels like a great exercise for just loosening up. Like, it's interesting. We have painted a few Cubist paintings already, and one of the I haven't really painted Cubist paintings in the past before teaching these classes, and so the prior ones seemed very slow and methodical, and was not, for me, one of the more pleasant experiences of painting. I was very satisfied with the way they turned out, but if you were to ask myself, like, is this the kind of style that I want to be painting in? I would probably say not really. It was too labor intensive. Whereas it's ironic that Picasso is the one, along with Braque, to have invented Cubism, and then later on in his career is making a painting like this that is just really extremely loose, basically the exact opposite of that particular approach. So that should also just be, again, another invitation to you that you can also change your own approach from painting to painting, or every few years adopt a different style. I have changed my own style over the years, and it has led to some disagreements, shall we say, with like a gallery that used to represent me and was like not so pleased with the different directions that I've taken with my style, and was like, well, and has literally told me, like, if you want to sell more paintings, then provide me more of and I know people that will buy them right now. This new stuff there might be a few people that will buy it, but I'm just telling you. And she was right, but sometimes, like, when you're working on it, it's hard to, the painting takes you in a different direction, and it's like, it can be really difficult to try to do what you've done before for all sorts of different reasons. So and the gallery owner that I'm thinking about knows exactly how, I agreed. It's not like I'm spreading any kind of crazy gossip about my own career as if it even mattered. But yeah, it's just, that's the reality of making art. Or you're making a kind of product, as much as, like, some artists shudder to hear that, but if McDonald's all of a sudden stopped selling cheeseburgers and hamburgers and started selling, I don't know, banh mi sandwiches. I love banh mi. I would be really happy, but a lot of people walking in there would be like, what? Where's my bacon and egger thing, muffin, whatever? And they would alienate a whole bunch of their customers. They could gain a few more, but they might lose the majority of their... So anyway, that's just... But, you know, big company is less likely to make a decision like that. It would seem like, you know, absurd. But when you're an artist and a new direction is calling, it's hard to say no. Okay, so now I'm starting to get a bunch of big blobs of wet color. So let's just take a zoom out and just take a look at these. Oops. So we can see where we're at this stage. All right, we're not interesting. Lori is saying, there's a few things. Heidi says, hi everyone, I have been painting along, but at a much slower rate as always. I'm still in the blue paint stage. I have to make dinner now. We'll watch later. We'll watch while making soup dumplings. That sounds delicious. I wish I was coming over for dinner. Paul says, have a good dinner, Heidi. Lori says, just so you know, the music still has a static sound. The painting looks great, though. Maybe I'm just going to reduce this music. Oh, yeah, let's make it even quieter. It's probably barely audible now. Thank you. I appreciate that. Is it me, or does the sound get louder and sometimes sound like a tape rewinding, or am I going nuts? I think there is something that, in fact... Yeah, I don't know. I'm not even going to bother sitting there trying to figure out what's wrong with it, but let me know if that is maybe... I don't want it to be annoying. The last thing I want it to be is if it's driving you bonkers, then I'll just turn it right off. Paul says, what are those black blocks? You mean, I think down in this area? I'm assuming it's part of her clothing, so... You know, when I look at it, it makes me think of, like, I don't know the name of the kind of fabric, but it does remind me of like the fabric that I've seen, like, in Latin American fashion, particularly of like the 40s and 50s, kind of like these big, like folded fabric. I don't know how to think, like, and almost maybe slightly transparent. That's what I think about it, like a very architectural kind of a fashion. Anyway, clearly not a fashion person. Lori says, whatever you just did when reading the chat, the noise stopped. I did reduce the volume of the of that music, so hopefully that helps. Okay, so now I've got a big, you know, one of the things of kind of working your way around, I've sort of painted my, you know, now to get at this, I need this to be dry. So I'm going to blow dry all of this, and because I do have some very thick paint here, which is not the brightest. I mean, ideally I probably should have done that first, but no one has ever accused me of being the brightest, so I'm just doing my best to confirm what is already known. Okay. So let's mix a dark blue, dark warm blue. I think I can still... Oh! I didn't need to use that much, so let's see if I can suck this paint back into the tube. No, I don't think it's going to work very well. In fact, rather than trying to put it back into the tube, let's see, can I have any space in here for it to go? Okay, cool. And let's just move that out of the way. Yeah, like look at all this paint that just is otherwise could go down the tubes. I think there might even still be a little bit left. I could probably get next class's paint out of this tube too. So let's put that to the side. I keep wanting to say, oh, I haven't got any paint on my pants yet. And then I think, no, don't say that, because the key thing there is yet. And then moments later, there's a, oh, no. So, I think I'm just going to paint with the blue just right out of the tube. I was considering adding some black to it, or the dark color that I've used, but I think it will be just fine just as it is. It might be a little bit transparent. That's my only worry. Blue tends to be a bit transparent, so, but that also is not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing, right? Okay. So make sure there's nothing. I did blow dry it, but there's still some stuff that can stay wet for a while, so. What just happened? Oh. Overhead camera momentarily overheated. Okay. So let's go to a different view for a second here. I forgot to turn my fans on. I thought it was getting kind of colder in here. It's kind of, there's something kind of nice about the camera shutting off because it's too hot. It's like, oh yeah, we could still be a little bit too hot even though it's fall. So the thing is with this is I might have to do a second. Well, there's two ways I can go about it. One is I could darken it a bit. I think I'm just gonna, I will put a little bit of my dark color in with this blue, make it a little bit more opaque. That's actually kind of nice. Okay, let's come down here onto these. These are the lips. So you can be the judge, and you can tell me what you think of using the blue when it's a little bit more transparent. I don't mind it so much. If it really drove me crazy, I could go back over some of these, but I think it's all gonna be okay. Now I got this extra somehow. I ended up with. Oh, I did the teeth in the wrong place, didn't I? Huh. Okay, that's interesting. I can paint that out. Let's put the teeth down here. I was like, huh, that's... Okay. Or maybe that's fine just like that. I don't know. Let's just let it all play out before I start trying to frantically make any changes. So I wonder what all of this is intended to be down here. It seems like... Are these words coming out of her mouth, or the wailing sounds of like intense grief? I'm not sure. There's also, like, you don't have to read. Not everything has a meaning, right? There might be a meaning to it, but it's also possible that it's just entirely, while he's painting, he's like, I kind of like the way this looks. I'm just gonna run with it. In fact, that's probably more likely than anything. Is how the painting sort of looks the way it does. Oops, let's go move this up. Wow, I wonder how many people are actually painting today's painting or working on something else. And if you're working on something else, I'm curious to know what it is you're actually working on. Is it another Picasso or different painting entirely? Is it something of your own? Okay, I think I might, as I'm getting closer to these getting done, I think I might just add a bit of white back onto that top lip and just make that change now so it has a bit of time to dry. This is, you know, this feels like a very Picasso-y thing to do. It's like you paint something, you're not happy with it, so you paint it out, move something around. I have to wait for that to dry and put another layer. Okay. So what is this? This is another finger, I think, up here. Sometimes it's just like this, the one angle you try to paint things in, just turning the canvas for a second makes a huge difference. And then a finger, a lot of wet paint everywhere, so Obviously things have taken a bit of a different direction right here. So let's just zoom back out and just take a look. Put a little bit of white back on here. That's okay. Okay, I think I'm going to let this area dry, and while that's all slowly drying away, I'm going to do a little bit of some, oh, there's a bit of, I think that's a dark brown. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to mix a little quick darker brown here. Need to do more of that, so let's just get a little bit more paint. Ooh, always seem like I squeeze out more paint at the very end of the painting session. Than I need. One of the things that actually a lot of artists used to do quite commonly is use all of that extra paint that's on the canvas and mix it together to create your ground. So if you've got a bunch of extra paint, if you kind of blend it together, you're going to get this kind of blobby, brown, kind of grayish thing. Actually, the oil company whose paint that I use all the time, Gamblin, they do precisely that, and they sell these tubes relatively inexpensively. And they make a big deal promoting it as a way of, like, rather than just dumping a bunch of paint into the garbage, they sell these different blends of gray. They call Portland gray because the company is based in Portland. And I think it's a really smart kind of thing because it's just sort of, and the colors each year they have just sort of like wine, like different batches of gray, and they'll be like this year's gray is a lot warmer than last year's. And people snap it up. They've made it into, like, it's really smart marketing because then they actually have a competition, like who can make the best painting using the Portland gray that they've made that year, like a Cabernet, like a, not Cabernet, what is it? The Beaujolais. I don't know why I'm spacing on this. Beaujolais. People snap up all the new Beaujolais. I think that's, well, a lot of wines are like that, right? But I think it's the Beaujolais that people go most nuts over. It's been a while. I used to work at a liquor store in another life a long time ago when I was in college. So somewhere in my brain I know all that information. But there's a lot of other nuts and bolts rattling around in there that have taken the place of actual useful information. Let's make this a bit more of a reddish brown. Okay, looking good. I'm pretty happy. Still lots of people painting away. The chat has slowed down dramatically, which is usually a good sign. It means people are working and painting and they're too focused to answer questions. So one of the last things I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of my warm yellow, and let's put this down here, and some white, and mix this together. Maybe I would take a bit of cool yellow just to give it a bit more pop, and since I've also got a bunch of it left over, I think I accidentally got a little bit of darker color in there, but that's all right. But I'm going to use this just for doing a little bit of outlining in a few places that I feel like need it. So let's bring this back here. The quickest way, or not the quickest, one way to do this would be to literally actually paint white here and then to go over it with yellow, because that white will really cover any of the darker colors really effectively. But I don't mind how this looks right now. Oh, there's some more there. Going to paint over that. I'm going to paint the black lines over top. Whoa, that's crazy. What's my big head in the way causing it to focus? So I find this very satisfying because now we're really cleaning up any kind of little sloppy areas. And I did say that part of what's the great part of doing a painting like this is it feels very liberating. But it doesn't mean you can't also have a few areas that are radically improved with just an extra little bit of love that you just kind of spread around in a few places here. Kind of do a bit of a dry brush in here. Is that where all the yellow goes? Oh, I just saw another little place. You know, again, at the end of these, I always say this is my favorite part of making a painting, is the fiddling that we get to do right at the end. I know not everyone feels that way, though. Some people really like the beginning part of the painting, where they're really just throwing paint around, being very expressive. And that's a totally legitimate thing, part of and if that's something you're really interested in, then maybe that is the kind of painting you ought to do more of, right? Very gestural, expressionistic kind of painting. Finally, I've gotten rid of those teeth that were in the lips, so that took a little while, a few layers to take care of. So I'm just really quickly going over a few of these places where I put some yellow already, doing just a final coat, and then I'll finish them off by doing a bit of outlining in black or blue or whatever color, and then we'll be wrapping up hopefully in the next maybe 10 minutes, the latest. So I haven't used any black in this painting at all, right? Not that that's necessarily a bad, or that I should pat myself on the back for it. It's just letting people know that it is possible to do this entire painting without a drip of black paint. Right, all of this is just colors that I've mixed from, on the palette. This dark color is a color derived from cool blue, warm red, and a bit of cool yellow. Okay, so that paintbrush getting clogged up. Let's zoom in for these final details as we look around here. I think I'm just going to do these as circles rather than the way they are. Why not? It's my painting. Oh, you couldn't even see what I'm doing anyway, so I was just doing these little circles on the fingernails, which, as I said, are different than how he originally did them. I think a little bit of this dark lines just in places on top of the blue seems to be kind of quite effective. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that. Sort of like outlining the outline. Starting to get kind of blobby, and when you're painting, it just trying to, as the paint is definitely, it's been on the palette for a few hours. It's not happy about being there. It wants to dry up. rotate this canvas real quick. Can't even see me do that, darn it. Okay. Might I be done? Is there anything that I'm looking at that needs a last little thing? Now, I would say, well, there's definitely things I could work on for a while, but there are these lines right here in the background, but I don't know if I want to do that. I kind of just like it like this, I think. I mean, there is definitely a little bit of maybe nuance in here, where a little bit of some maybe cool blues in a few places there. It's also a little bit darker in his than mine is right there. That's not purple. I mean, so there's these little tiny details, but as I look at it, I think, is it really important to get those areas, or can I walk away? And I think I can walk away. So okay, so thank you everyone for painting along with me over the past 3 hours here. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you want to support the channel with a small donation as little as $1, there's a PayPal link below. I'd be grateful for your support, and I'm really grateful for all of those of you who've contributed over the past year and a half to the show, to literally buying the lights and cameras that I've been using. I began just using an iPhone, and here I am with all this professional gear, and I owe it to all of those of you who've been painting with me for this long time. And you can also send a check or e-transfer, contact me through my website or the Facebook group, and that reminds me to join the Facebook group. Upload your version of today's painting so that we can look at it next weekend. I think next Saturday at 1 o'clock we'll be doing that. So until then, enjoy your evening. Tomorrow, join me for Niki de Saint-Phal, one of the great female French artists, the exact antidote to Picasso. She is like a radical feminist, you know, like we're gonna have a lot of fun. We'll talk about her. She also did paintings where she literally shot a shotgun at paintings that had paint in balloons stuck inside the canvas. And so we'll talk about those. We're not going to do that tomorrow, although you could if you want. But anyway, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your evening wherever you are on planet Earth, and maybe it's a morning, maybe it's you're just having your lunch. Speaking of which, I'm gonna go have dinner and then read a story to our daughter and put her to bed. So we'll see you guys then. Have a good night, everybody. Talk to you soon.